Welcome to this video presentation. This presentation will encompass a discussion around the topic of sexuality and aging. I will introduce this topic by covering some of the basic characteristics of sexuality and aging, as well as some of the definitions and epidemiology that pertain to this particular age-related topic. Furthermore, recent evidence-based information regarding this topic will be presented, followed by an element that has been portrayed in the media, and the influence that this element has had on sexuality and aging. Lastly, I will close the video presentation by providing a summary of this age-related topic as well as my closing statements. So, let's begin. In order to have a deeper understanding of the topic of sexuality and aging, it is important to understand the individual meanings of the terms sexuality and aging. Firstly, with regards to sexuality, this is something that applies to all of us, regardless of our age. The definition of sexuality has many dimensions and can mean different things to different people. In the broadest sense, sexuality encompasses the ways in which a person goes about expressing him or herself as a sexual being. This could be through the desire of wanting to look good and feel pampered, as well as through participating in activities such as holding hands, cuddling, and flirting as a few examples. Many people often define sexuality in terms of our genitals and what we do with them and who we do it with. However, sexuality encompasses many more aspects, and it is something that begins before birth and is a lifelong process until we die. There are four primary components of sexuality, and they are sensuality, intimacy and relationships, gender/sexual identity, as well as sexual health and reproduction. Sensuality is defined as the awareness, acceptance, and comfort that an individual has with their own body and the ability for this individual to both physiologically and psychologically enjoy their own body as well as the bodies of others. Intimacy is defined as an individual's ability and need to experience emotional closeness with another human being and have it returned. Also, as a part of this definition, an intimate relationship is a type of interpersonal relationship that involves physical and/or emotional intimacy. Physical intimacy can be characterized by activities such as holding hands, kissing, or hugging, whereas emotional intimacy can be characterized by the development of personal bonds with their significant other. Moving on to gender/sexual identity, this is defined as the ability of an individual to develop a sense of who they are sexually and whether or not they identify with the characteristics pertaining to maleness or femaleness. And lastly, sexual health is defined as the ability of an individual to care and maintain their sex and reproductive organs, as well as the ability of this individual to identify the health consequences of sexual behavior. To add to that, reproduction is defined as the attitudes and behaviors that are related to the production of children. Each of these individual components of sexuality discussed above can be healthy or unhealthy aspects that are influenced by an individual's experience, values, culture, and spirituality. Now that we have an understanding of the term sexuality, let's move on to the definition of aging. To be put simply, aging can be defined as the process of becoming older. This process is one that is genetically determined and environmentally controlled. Aging can represent the accumulation of physical, psychological, and social changes that develop in a human being over time. On a more scientific perspective, senescence, or in other words, biological aging, can be defined as the time-related deterioration of the physiological functions necessary for survival and fertility. A term that would be beneficial with regards to understanding the definition of aging would be the term older adult. The term older adult is generally given to those who belong to the age group that includes people who are over 65 years of age. Finally, with regards to sexuality in older adults, there are many benefits that a healthy sex life can bring to older adults. It is a known fact that sex is a very important and critical aspect towards adequately attaining and improving mental, emotional, and physical health. Did you know that sex can burn fat and cause the brain to release endorphins, as well as drastically reduce anxiety? Sex is also an activity that helps to solidify relationships, as it allows two individuals to establish personal intimacy between each other. Sex also gives the opportunity of the expression of feelings for a partner or significant other. It has also been determined that a healthy sex life can add years to an individual's life. Sexual health is expected to change as we age. However, the process of aging does not mean that the participation in sexual activity must end. A healthy and enjoyable sex life can be acquired at any age. As stated earlier, as we age, our sexual health will change. This brings about many physiological changes in both men and women. These changes are considered to be normal changes in aging and can inherently affect an older adult's ability to have and enjoy sex. Firstly, with regards to the physiological changes that can occur in women as they age, most of these physical changes are known to occur after menopause and are the result of decreased estrogen levels in the body. When a woman's ovaries stops the production of eggs, this causes a decline in the amount of estrogen being produced. Estrogen is a hormone that is critical in keeping the vagina flexible and lubricated. Consequently, the walls of the vagina can become thinner, shorter, drier, and narrower, therefore becoming more susceptible to irritation during sexual intercourse. This can lead to the development of a condition known as atrophic vaginitis, which is essentially the inflammation of the vagina as well as the outer urinary tract. Another physiological change that is common amongst older women is that orgasms may be shorter in duration. Also, the contractions experienced during the orgasm may also be significantly less intense in nature. Decreased estrogen levels in the body are also known to cause a decline in the sex drive of older women, as they may take a significantly longer period of time to become sexually excited or aroused. With regards to the physiological changes that may occur in men as they age in terms of their sexual health, the majority of these physiological changes can be attributed to a gradual decline in the amount of testosterone levels in the body. It has been determined that a man's sexual response inherently begins to slow down after the age of 50. However, it has been believed that a man's sexual drive is more likely to be affected by the state of his health and his respective attitudes in terms of sex and intimacy rather than by his age. Common physiological changes seen in men include a slower, less firm erection that recedes quickly after orgasm, a decreased force in ejaculation resulting in a lower volume of semen, and an increase in the time needed before being able to be sexually aroused again after orgasm, as well as a decrease in the size and firmness of the testes. When it comes to older adults and sex, there are definitely some significant barriers that may impede an older adult's ability to engage in sexual behavior. Most of these barriers can be attributed to certain chronic conditions such as arthritis, cardiovascular disease, and stroke as a few examples. Arthritis can contribute to weakness, fatigue, pain, and limited movement. This is why it is important for older adults to find positions that avoid and reduce pain. Pain and stiffness in the hip joints are the most common cause of sexual difficulty. Also, some of the medications that are used to treat arthritis have been shown to decrease libido. With regards to cardiovascular disease, although blood pressure does increase during sexual activity, this is not hazardous to health as long as the condition is under control as deemed by a physician. Only in severe cases, such as directly after a heart attack or other cardiovascular event, should sex be prohibited. Arteriosclerosis is a common cause of erection problems in men, and lastly, common problems associated with stroke are erectile dysfunction in men and poor vaginal lubrication in women. Other factors that can affect sex in older adults include the use of medications. So some medications may impact sexual arousal and performance, as well as surgery, especially the surgeries involving the sex organs or glands, and living situations, and this is where a loved one may live in an extended care unit or nursing home where there are limits to how much sexuality can be expressed. It may seem like a surprise to us, but older adults are still having sex. Some of the statistics which have been uncovered in recent studies prove this fact. According to the longitudinal study of aging, 31% of men from the ages of 80 to 90 still masturbate and have sex, and just under 60% of men between the ages of 70 and 80 are still sexually active. When it comes to women, 14% of them between the ages of 80 and 90, and 34% of women between 70 and 80 regularly engage in sex or masturbation. Indiana's University Center for Sexual Health Promotion showed similar statistics in their study. They discovered that 46% of men and 33% of women over 70 report that they masturbate, and 43% of men and 22% of women in the same age group say that they regularly engage in sexual intercourse. Furthermore, a study conducted by researchers at the National Commission of Aging showed that women in particular find sex over 70 and more physically satisfying than they did in their 40s. It was also found that sex was more emotionally satisfying for both genders. When it comes to sexual health in older adults are susceptible to acquiring the same sexually transmitted diseases as younger people. It is important to note that more and more older adults are being diagnosed with HIV/AIDS. Approximately 12% to 20% of all new AIDS cases are among men and women over the age of 65. Other sexually transmitted infections in which have been reported among older adults include chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis. This does not indicate that older adults should stop having sex, although it is important that the appropriate precautions are taken when engaging in sexual behavior in order to ensure that sexual and overall health are protected at all costs. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that screening of adults for STIs should occur regardless of age. With regards to recent evidence-based information, there are many peer-reviewed research studies that have been conducted in the past pertaining to the topic of sexuality and aging. As an example, a peer-reviewed research study titled The Perception of Sexuality in Older Adults and Its Relationship with Cognitive Functioning, which was published in the spring of 2015, investigated whether or not cognitive functioning can be associated with the perception of one's sexuality in old age. So essentially, this particular study is aiming to discover the way in which older adults perceive their sexuality, whether they may view their sexuality as something that is important versus something that is unimportant, and whether or not this has an impact on their respective cognitive functioning. The participants of the study were comprised of 1,908 older adults with a mean age of 71 years. With regards to the methods used in the study, in order to observe cognitive functioning in the older adults, 4 different cognitive domains were assessed. These cognitive domains included general cognitive functioning, memory performance, processing speed, and fluid intelligence. General cognitive functioning was assessed by using what is known as the Mini Mental State Examination, or in other words the MMSE, which is a 20-item questionnaire used to screen for cognitive impairment. The maximum score that can be achieved on this examination is 30, with a higher score indicating better cognitive functioning. Memory performance was assessed using the Auditory Verbal Learning Test, or in other words the AVLT, which is a short test used for the purpose of measuring the retention of auditory information for a longer period. The maximum score that can be achieved on this test is 75, with a higher score indicating better memory performance. Processing speed was assessed using a timed coding task. This particular test involved the display of 2 rows of characters, with each character in the upper row belonging to a character in the bottom row. This test also included 2 rows, with the upper row containing characters and an empty bottom row with no characters. The participants had to complete as many character combinations as possible by naming the corresponding character. This test was conducted in 3 one-minute trials with higher scores indicating better cognitive performance. And lastly, fluid intelligence was assessed through a test known as the Raven's Colored Progressive Matrices, or in other words, the RCPM. For this test, 24 different drawings were portrayed to the older adults. Each of these individual drawings consisted of a pattern that is missing a section. For each drawing in which was shown, 6 alternative patterns were printed at the bottom of the page, one of which directly corresponded to the missing section. The older adults had to choose which of the 6 alternative patterns fitted best into the missing section. 1 point counts for a correctly chosen pattern, which resulted in this test having a total scale score ranging from 0 to 24. A higher score accounted for greater fluid intelligence within each older adult. With regards to the sexuality aspect of the study, 4 individual questions were developed in order to assess each older adult's perception and opinion about sexuality. The first 2 questions that were developed and assessed the perception of the importance of current sexuality and sexual life. These questions were, how important is sexuality for you now, and how do you feel about your sexual life now? The responses that were obtained from these questions were measured on a 5-point Likert scale, in which the response options ranged from very unimportant to very important, to measure the perception that these older adults have on the importance of their current sexuality, and very unpleasant to very pleasant, in order to measure the state of each older adult's current sexual life. Question 3 measured each older adult's opinion about sexuality in general. Question 3 asked, at this age, sexuality is not important. And lastly, with regards to question 4, which was now that I am getting older, I still need intimacy and being touched. This question assessed the current need for intimacy and touch. Similar to questions 1 and 2, the response options for questions 3 and 4 were also measured on a 5-point Likert scale, in which the response options ranged from strongly disagree to strongly agree. It is also important to note some of the co-founding variables in this study. These co-founding variables included socio-demographic characteristics such as age, gender, partner status, and the level of education in years, as well as the presence of somatic chronic diseases, functional limitations, the display of depressive symptoms, and the use of antidepressants and/or benzodiazepines. Moving on to the results obtained from the study, Table 1, which is displayed in 2 parts here, shows the sample characteristics, neurophysiological test scores, and the scores attained on the sexuality questions. Table 2, which is displayed here, presents the mean scores of cognitive performance according to the response categories of the sexuality questions. These results, in which were discovered, suggest that the older adults in the study who did not agree about the importance of sexual behavior and the need for intimacy in their current phase of life, and the older adults who evaluated their sexual life as unpleasant, also exhibited lower mean scores on cognitive tasks. This can further be expressed through the data presented in Table 3. Firstly, with regards to question 1, which assessed the importance of sexuality now, it was discovered that there was a significant association between fluid intelligence and the importance of current sexuality. The older adults in this study who perceive sexuality as something that is of unimportance in their phase of life attained the lowest mean scores in terms of fluid intelligence as opposed to the older adults who perceive their sexuality as important. Also, lower mean scores in general cognitive functioning were found in those who perceive their current sexuality as unimportant. For question 2, which evaluated the current state of sexual life, it was found that those who evaluated their sexual life now as unpleasant exhibited lower scores on immediate memory recall. Analyses also showed significant associations between fluid intelligence, processing speed, and general cognitive functioning, and the statement, at this age, sexuality is no longer important, with those who agreed with this statement having the lowest scores. And lastly, it was discovered that processing speed, general cognitive functioning, and delayed memory recall were significantly associated with the statement, now that I am getting older, I still need intimacy and being touched. The older adults who disagreed with this statement had the lowest mean scores. With regards to the limitations of the study, it can be fair to say that the number of questions focusing on sexuality was limited and did not measure all aspects of current sexual behavior. Also, the sample used in the study was a relatively cognitively intact group. However, the older adults who obtained low cognitive scores were not excluded from the sample. As we had seen in Table 1, the mean scores do not reflect a cognitively impaired sample. The older adults who may have had severe cognitive impairments may not have been included in the study due to attrition during the follow-up measurement cycle, and this attrition during the follow-up of less healthy individuals may imply that the results obtained in the study are only applicable to relatively healthy older people. 24.6% of the older adults who participated in the study perceived their current sexuality as important, and 42% agreed that sexuality at this age is important. It was observed that higher cognitive functioning was associated with the way in which older people perceive or rate their current sexuality. The older adults who were satisfied with their sexual life and perceived current sexuality as important exhibited better general cognitive functioning. The perceived need for intimacy found in roughly 2/3 of the respondents is in line with the general findings of another study where it was found that a preference does indeed exist for a sexual relationship, that of which included kissing and touching. The message to take away from this study is that just by older adults perceiving their sexuality as important, this can lead to better health, which in this case, the aspect of better health is improved cognitive function. But imagine what can be achieved when older adults actively explored their own sexuality and actually participated in having active sex lives. This can further lead to these older adults being able to successfully attain, protect, and improve their overall health and well-being. Let's move on to an element portrayed in the media. The media in our society today plays a critical role in shaping the attitudes of people. The negative social and cultural definitions that have been constructed in the media around the topic of sexuality and aging over the years has played a critical role in influencing people in terms of their attitudes about older adults and sex. An example of this can be demonstrated through a Brazilian commercial called "Sexuality Comes with an Expiration Date" that was released to the public in 1998 for the purpose of advertising a stereo speaker as the product. Let's watch the video.
New E1000 Gradiente. Sorry, neighbors.
Through the content in which I have discussed in my presentation so far, and also through the numerous research studies in which have been conducted surrounding the topic of sexuality in older adults, it is quite clear that the way in which older adults were depicted in the video is not an accurate representation of sexuality and normal aging. Despite what the popular media might indicate, sexuality and intimacy play an active role in our lives as we age. Reports from the Journal of the American Medical Association have demonstrated that sexual activity is indeed good for health, especially in the later years of life, as it can relieve stress, improve sleep, burn calories, ease depression, and boost the immune system. Despite the negative influence that the media portrays in terms of aging and sex, more and more older adults these days are participating in a healthy sex life as they start to realize the countless amounts of health benefits that can be obtained from engaging in this behavior. It is also important to note that commercials similar to the one shown here can certainly have a significant influence on ageism. One reason for this is because these commercials stereotype and assume that older adults are non-sexual beings who are not having sex, not interested in having sex, and are not capable of having sex even if they wanted to. This commercial also draws humor, embarrassment, and disgust to the concept of older adults engaging in sexual activity. This could consequently lead to older adults internalizing these values, therefore forcing themselves in becoming sexually inactive at an age when they could still be having a rewarding and enjoyable sex life. The media also portrays sexual activity as something that is only preserved for young and attractive people. Notice that in the commercial, it is quite obvious that the sounds coming out of the speaker are of a young couple, not an old couple, engaging in sex. These types of commercials have led society to believe that older adults are less interested and less capable in having sex than younger individuals, and this has led to the sexual needs of older adults being ignored by healthcare professionals, family members, and society in general. We need to change our perceptions in the way we think about sexuality and aging in order to resolve this issue. Let's talk about the ways in which sexuality in older adults can be improved. With specific regards to Canada, the National Seniors Council can potentially be an appropriate resource for improving and helping the issues surrounding sexuality and aging. Although information about sexuality and aging is not directly portrayed on the National Seniors Council website, as we can see, the Government of Canada, who runs this council, does indeed recognize that older adults are a valuable resource to this country, and that the population of them are growing significantly. The National Seniors Council is interested in hearing the ideas and views that older adults have, especially when policies, programs, and services are being created that could significantly impact their well-being. This gives the older adults the opportunity to voice their opinions and concerns in regards to what they believe should be done in order to improve the issues surrounding sexuality and aging in Canada, which could essentially result in something to be changed for the better. In terms of advocacy programs, the Calgary Sexual Health Centre, located in Calgary, created a program targeted at older adults that basically works to initiate conversations about sexuality with them in order to break down the stereotypes and promote healthy attitudes towards older adults and sexuality. The Calgary Sexual Health Centre also makes it a priority to give the appropriate information to older adults on how to access certain sexual health services. Another online resource that is beneficial towards sexuality and aging is a website called sexandyou.ca. This website answers questions and addresses issues surrounding sex and sexuality. This is a website that was implemented by the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada, which is Canada's leading authority on sexual and reproductive health. The image of this website, in which is shown here, depicts the sexual problems in which are most commonly seen in older adults. Although these problems can also be attributed to individuals at any age, there is also a section dedicated specifically towards sex and aging, in which recommendations for treatments for both men and women are shown to resolve any sexual problems in which they may experience. Although this website does not specifically state that this is particularly aimed towards older adults, just like younger people, older adults also need to be concerned about the prospect of sexually transmitted infections, as they are equally, if not more, susceptible to acquiring them. This website is beneficial as it can significantly improve the sexual health of older adults by informing them about the risks associated with STIs, as well as give them information about prevention strategies, management, and diagnosis of STIs. However, I have come to notice that in Canada, or more specifically in Ontario, there are not many programs, policies, or online resources particularly targeted at the topic of sexuality in older adults. We see a lot of resources for older adults for issues surrounding elderly abuse or physical activity and healthy eating in older adults, or even fall prevention in older adults as a few examples. I find it quite strange that sexuality and aging is lacking resources, especially in today's day and age, considering all the prejudice and discrimination older adults face in terms of their sexuality. The topic of sexuality and aging is a very prominent issue in our society today. Sexual health is important at any age. The ways in which people express and experience sexuality will change throughout their lives as they age. While sex may not be like how it was while in your 20s, sex is still something that can be very rewarding and fulfilling. As older adults approach their later stages of life, some of the things in which may have brought them the greatest joy and took up a whole lot of their energy and time, such as their children or careers, are no longer of very much importance as they used to be. This is why it is important to take pride in our personal relationships, as the desire for intimacy never ends. It is something that is timeless. Thank you for listening.